Hello humans! Today I picked up this guy right here. This is a Cold Steel Engage with their, with their new Atlas lock. Check that out. And I haven't actually gotten to experience the Atlas lock yet, so I am very, very excited that I ended up getting this. Knives are extremely sharp, hopefully. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of having a knife. Patent pending means very little. We're subject to the higher standard. So please do not use this product inappropriately, which if you've ever made your way over to Cold Steel's YouTube page, absolutely do that. They are brutal. If you can find ways to torture their knives that they haven't, it's definitely a mark of honor. Nickel, state of California. This knife is going to give me cancer and make my balls not work. Perfect. So this is the 3-inch version of the Engage with the S35 VN blade steel, which I'm actually pretty excited about. So let's pop this open. Nice and simple. Got bubble wrap. Plain cardboard box, burn it, recycle it, do whatever you do with it. I like a plain cardboard box, personally. And then we have bubble wrap packaging. That's fun. Might actually be Trapped Air brand. I can't tell. Oh yeah, by the way, fun fact, the actual brand that makes bubble wrap is Trapped Air. Just because. Alright, and then here we have the Cold Steel Engaged, Taiwan made. Ooh. Yeah, that's gonna prove to be very, very fun. Okay. So immediately off the bat, this is a very thin feeling knife. I don't know how obvious that is to look at it, but I'm just gonna, I don't typically do this until later, but I'm just gonna compare this to a Zippo real quick, and this is noticeably thinner than the Zippo is, which is just insane to me. This is very sleek feeling, which is kind of cool. I'm not gonna be able to. Thumb studs only, that action is a lot better. So I'm trying to think about what would be comparable in terms of how this locking mechanism works, and the only thing I can really think of would be a shark lock. Crossbar lock a little bit, but really and truly this operates similarly to a shark lock. Except it's so much smoother. That's actually... Wow, that's nice. Okay, that's super slick. We have our standard amount of Cold Steel signposting. It's actually not too bad, but on a knife this small, because Cold Steel normally makes really large knives, on a knife this small, that is definitely noticeably sized. And then we have the model name right there. And again, immediately off the bat, I'm really liking this little thumb divot. It's a very comfortable place for me to put my thumb for if I was to try to do some harder work. And given Cold Steel's whole reputation and everything else that they do, I imagine that the Atlas lock is going to be the strongest lock in its class. Probably by a fairly wide margin, to be perfectly frank. We got jimping on the actual lock itself. Very light blade. This is actually quite a thin blade. Not going to drop shut unless the lock is pulled open. That's nothing bad or unexpected necessarily. We have a fairly high, what is that, a flat grind? We're rocking with cassettes today. Yeah, that is absolutely a flat grind. Fairly high flat grind, clip point blade, swedged clip point. This is actually nice. I really like the look of this blade. I think this is very, very slick looking. With the initial line that flows nicely into the handle there, followed by that thumb divot, and then the clip point with its swedge. Very, very prime, in my opinion. We have black G10 with a little bit of, it's more visual interest than texturing, really and truly, but a little bit of visual interest on both sides. And is that slightly, not even all that slightly. This is absolutely contoured. For being this thin, it is quite comfortable. I'm a little bit surprised. And then we have a Cold Steel branded pocket clip. I definitely do dig the way they do that. It's a deep carry pocket clip. You've got a lanyard loop right next to it. I am curious how well it's going to work. It is quite a bit shorter than most pocket clips in sort of this knife size and class, but I wouldn't be too surprised. All right, let's get right into testing this guy. I'm quite excited for this part, so. Right. Okay, so I am being a little bit unfair to the edge on purpose and pushing it to try things that I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be able to do. But this is proving, wow, that's impressive. That is actually quite sharp. Cold Steels generally are fairly sharp out of the box, but that was impressive. What I'm doing here is I'm just giving a feel both for the consistency of the edge and also how well refined it is. I'm not feeling any mini serrations or anything like that. This does feel like a fairly well refined, quite consistent edge. You can actually see, like, it looks really good, which I am quite happy with. Up next, we have our rubber test. I could foresee a little bit of shouldering right here. I'm not super worried about it, but I could absolutely foresee a little bit of shouldering right there. Let's find out. I don't know if it's just the finish on it or what, but this is almost having like a hard time. Oh no, that was way better. Okay. Must have just been the fact that I was trying to push cut at a weird angle. I'm not feeling any shouldering or any significant point of increased pressure. I will say for a blade this thin, I was expecting it to be a little bit less. Oh no, that's way better. Okay, never mind. Must have just been something wacky I was doing the first couple times there. That feels quite nice. What I was going to say is I was expecting it to slice into the rubber a little bit better, just given how thin the blade is, but must have just been weird angle, weird push. Ooh, that's actually nice too. That's slick. All right. Now for our puncture test. Yeah, that's not surprising in the slightest. It's just sinking in there very happily. Yeah, very little resistance. I mean, it's a thin blade, it's a clip point blade, and it's a sharp blade. That makes a very effective poking implement, no matter how you want to slice it. So that is quite nice. Another thing that I'm noticing that I think is pretty cool is a very minimal amount of hardware. Oh, come on. We have our pivot screw with the nice, flat, good-looking side on the non-show side scale, because of course. And then we have 2 screws for the pocket clip that go all the way through, and I'm assuming are what's doing all of the holding at the back. And then we have these pins for the lock operation. I imagine if the handle was a little bit thicker, they might be hidden. But to be honest, I actually kind of like the look of them there. I think this is a very clean looking blade. I really do wish. We're going to see what happens with the time that I'm playing with this, but there's a very good chance I'm going to disassemble this guy on camera just to, one, switch over the flat side because it's just so much nicer. And it's not like it's a button head screw. I don't know how well it's going to be shown, but it's a button head screw, which is just super duper annoying because I can feel it. It's raised. This side here is perfectly flat. Looks like the pocket clip is reversible, which is good because this is a perfectly ambidextrous lock and perfectly ambidextrous, ooh, that was almost too easy, and perfectly ambidextrous thumb studs. So that's going to prove real nice. Sorry, I thought I saw just a little chip, but I don't feel it, so it must have just been a bit of rubber or something like that on the blade. Apologies. This is definitely not something that I would have pictured coming out of Cold Steel's lineup necessarily. I know they have made more reasonable knives in the past, and I mean, they make high quality stuff no matter what, but a 3-inch, very thin, very, very carryable knife was not something I would have necessarily expected. To be honest, if I did see one, I would have expected this to be like the Engage Small or the Engage Mini even. I think that at a 4-inch blade length, this would be incredibly cool. Just a little bit bigger, a little bit longer of a clip point. But for the size they chose, this is extraordinarily ergonomic, very, very thin, very, very clean and presentable, which is quite cool. I wish that was just, oh, you can. You're not supposed to do this. I guarantee that right from minute one. But what you can do, even though you're not really supposed to, is you can slow roll it with your thumb. And you can flick it with your thumb. Okay, I do not believe that this is supposed to be a front flipper, but, I mean, it does work as a front flipper, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm excited to carry this. To be honest, I think this is going to be a very, very carryable item. I don't think that this is going to be have much of a pocket presence, in large part because of how thin it is, but also because it's just not a huge profile. And I'm excited to play with this new lock style. Ooh, is that? No, it is centered. The way the light reflects off this is weird. Could just be the black on black. Internal liners are skeletonized, which is a thing. I don't know if it matters all that much on something this thin to begin with, but this is a very lightweight knife, so it does have that going for it. Man, that's fun. It feels like a more refined Shark Lock in terms of how good the action feels. And to be honest, if you level this off and put a little bit like of a horn in the front instead of an internal space back there, like if this was flat and you put a little horn right there to operate the access lock, this would be devastating. The only bit of discomfort I'm finding right now is the fact that because this is both inset and a little bit further back, I have to I'm kind of pinching my hand to get to it a little bit. Oh man, super smooth. It's got to be running on bearings. Wow. Yeah, no, initial thoughts. This is being done very, very well. I'm super excited to carry it, and I will be back shortly. And we are back. So I've been playing with this guy on and off for 3 weeks now, 4 weeks now, something like that. I need to like start writing down the date when I unbox stuff because it had been sitting here like over a week before I decided to unbox it. And then it's been an amount of time since then. Not entirely sure how long. But yeah, it's been close to a month, I think, since I've unboxed this, and I've carried it probably about a dozen times in that time. No, more than that. Probably about 20 times since I unboxed it. It's great. Like, it's a really, really nice knife. S35VN, it's come down in sort of like feel of premiumness in the past few years, but really and truly, it is a nice blade steel, and especially in that kind of under 200 Canadian dollar range, it is something I am overjoyed to see. I mean, I'm not upset about seeing it up to about 300 Canadian, but in that under 200 Canadian dollar range, I am so happy. The only thing that I did do to this knife in terms of like changing anything is I switched around the collar, which did involve me disassembling it. I should have videoed that. I totally forgot at the time, but I got to take a look at the internals of the lock, and the Atlas lock functions basically identically to the Shark Lock, which I did do a disassembly of in another video. The only difference really being that it's a little bit more stable. There's sort of like a fork that goes over and under these two pins. the part that engages with the lock goes underneath these two pins. So in order to break the lock up, you'd have to basically snap these pins and bend the lock bar, which something in this system will fail long before that's the case. Also, despite how incredibly smooth this is, it actually has two sets of washers in there. There's phosphor bronze washers on the outside interacting with this frame, and then on the inside there's Teflon style washers directly interacting with the blade. They are extremely smooth. Like, I don't think I've ever experienced this level of smoothness on a washer setup, which is just super duper cool. Something Cold Steel is really good with in terms of disassembly and stuff like that. Everything's Loctited, which is annoying when you want to disassemble it, but does mean that nothing moves throughout use. And I didn't switch around the pivot and break it open until like halfway through. And I was using this, mostly playing with it quite a bit. Absolutely did not come off center. It was extremely easy to recenter after the fact, which is quite nice. Absolutely rockets out. This is a super duper fun knife. I can't quite get like a quick thumb front flip out of it, but for slow rolling it, I've actually found using my thumb to be the best way. And then if I want it out quick, thumb studs work great. Lockup, extremely secure. There's absolutely no play, which is what you'd expect from something that you're expected to EDC. This is just a really, really prime feeling knife. For me personally, the knife that I'm going to be more or less directly comparing this to is going to be the Flytanium Arcade, which is somewhere over here. Where the hell did I put my arcade? There it is. I put it back in the wrong drawer. My apologies. So here's my Flytanium Arcade. They are very, very similar in terms of overall size. They have fairly similar blade shapes. I like my Arcade. For EDC, I actually prefer the Engage. If I need to use my knife and I know that I'm going to be using my knife for like wood carving and stuff like that, I prefer the Arcade. It has a little bit of a thicker grip and quite a bit of a thicker blade, which is just more comfortable, I find. Like, this is a very, very comfortable knife to hold and use for a very extended period of time. Whereas the Engage is very, very slim, which means it's comfortable to grab and it's comfortable to make quick cuts with. But I actually found, especially if I was like wood carving or something that required a little bit more like bearing down on the knife, I actually found it to be a little bit too slim for me personally. However, it absolutely disappears in a pocket. Like, it's not the lightest thing in the world for its size. I wish I had a scale down here. It's not the lightest thing in the world for its size, but it is extremely, extremely easy to put into a pocket, slim, and I mean, it's not heavy by any stretch of the imagination, right? I have brass inlays in my Arcade, so this is actually a relatively speaking heavy knife for its length and stuff like that, which I do like in some things. And like I said, this is a more hard use knife for me. Like, this does feel a lot tougher and I use it for a lot tougher stuff. So the extra weight is something I quite like. But yeah, the Engage, very lightweight, very comfortable. These lines don't provide any real meaningful texture, and there's no meaningful texture anywhere except for the lock bar. Lock bar? I don't know what to call this. Lock slide? The lock slide is kind of the only place that has any meaningful texture to it, but it is still very, very comfortable and quite easy to use, in all honesty. Right? Like, carrying this around, perfectly good experience. Yeah, S35VN, like I said, it's a good steel. I like the steel. It could be sort of, like, price-wise, I think this was just under 200 Canadian dollars, which is, for S35VN, a price point that I'm perfectly happy with. It is well made. It is well constructed. Loctite everywhere was a nice touch. It feels like a upgraded knife, which is everything under that 200 Canadian dollar range I consider to be upgraded. So between 1 and 200, anything above 200 I generally consider to be premium. I would comfortably pay 225 Canadian dollars for this and be a happy man. I mean, I'm happy that I didn't, but that would have been like where I start to go, maybe there's better things. Like, this is just nice. It does come in shorter versions. I'm glad I didn't get a shorter version. This grip here especially, like it fits my hand quite well. Anything smaller would have felt very, very cramped. I wouldn't mind seeing like an Engage L or an Engage XL in like a sort of 3.5 and 4-inch blade lengths. I think that would have been super cool, but we have what we have, and I am quite happy with it. In terms of hardware for disassembly, back here they're T6s. I wish they were T8s, but curiously enough, the actual pivot's a T10. So you can see fits in there nice and is in fact a T10, which, I mean, I'd have rather T8 and T8 rather than T10 and T6, but I'm never going to be somebody who's going to, I'll tighten that a bit. I'm never going to be somebody who's upset about a T10 pivot. Like, T10 pivot is a great thing. Black G10, it looks good. Let's do some size comparisons real quick. Here it is next to the Savivi Chevalier and the Wii Banter. So as you can see, it is a little bit smaller than the Chevalier. It actually fits really nicely between these two, comfortably into what I consider to be a medium-sized knife. Yeah, it's a bit bigger than the Banter, a little bit smaller than the Chevalier. Fits comfortably between the two, which is nice. And then here it is next to a Buck 110. And do I have an interesting Zippo today? I don't have a very interesting Zippo, but I do have knocking over lighters. Just a chrome Zippo. This is actually the one that I put the travel soft flame insert into. There's some rough size comparisons. In terms of its overall thickness, this is a very, very thin knife. I think it might not even be half the thickness of the Buck 110. Oh, it is. So you can see just how thin it is. Like, that's very, very slightly into the thickness of the second scale of the Buck 110, which means it's going to be quite a bit, yeah. It is quite a bit slimmer than Zippo. Like, this thing, it slips into a pocket very, very easily. It is fairly small, which is nice. Yeah, for an EDC especially, this thing's absolutely prime. If you're somebody who does a lot of like hard work, bearing down, cutting 2.5 hours worth of boxes a day, I would recommend something a little bit thicker or to wear gloves. Just it does feel a little bit thin for that amount of work. And the lock is absolutely tough enough to do it, right? Like, this is a very durable knife, even if it's not something that I personally would want to push to those extremes, right? So to that end, I think that it is very nice. Slow rolling with the thumb, like I said, that has worked very well for me. I can get it fairly fast with the thumb, but really and truly, if I want to be out quick, reverse flick or thumb studs. This does come in a less premium version as well, with 4116, which is a German culinary steel. A lot of German kitchen knives are made out of it. It's fine. It's not what I would consider to be the best stuff in the world, but it is significantly, significantly less expensive. So it can make a decent option. Blade thickness, real quick, before I forget. This is going to... my money's on this being fairly thin. Zero it out. At its thickest point, it is 0.09 of an inch. Like, this is a very, very slicey knife. Yeah, very robust build. Like, very robust build in terms of the lock and the subframe. Not subframe, like the actual frame without the scales. Is all very, very tough feeling, and then like the blade is very thin, very slicey, even without a full height flat grind. Like, it's only really a saber height flat grind. It slices like a freaking dream. 99.9% of people, this is going to make great. No, not even significant. Okay, I'm a little bit messed up in terms of how many people do different things. Where I live, there's a lot of farmers, a lot of tradespeople. This is not a knife that I would necessarily recommend to EDC to either one of those two groups. So around here, it's probably closer to like 75-25, but in a city, 99% of people are going to be fine with this. It's nice, it's comfortable, it works extremely, extremely well. And yeah, I like it quite a bit. I think it's very recommendable. It does cost a little, it's not cheap. It's definitely is an upgraded knife, but you definitely get an upgraded experience for that price. So I cannot complain, and I do think it is highly recommendable. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.